What's up, everyone? Ben with the BTC Sessions here, and this is your daily session.
Hodl that Bitcoin.
Before we jump in, couple quick things. Of course, do check out my website, btcsessions.ca. This is where you can reach out to me personally and book your own BTC session. All you need to do is scroll to the very bottom. There's a contact form for you there. And secondly, shout out to sponsors of the show, Ledn.io. This is where you can use your Bitcoin for a couple of different services. One of them is to secure a Canadian or US dollar loan. It's a really short application process, takes a couple minutes, and if you're approved, your bank account is typically funded within 24 hours. Also, they've just started offering Bitcoin savings account where you can get paid monthly interest paid in Bitcoin, not in dollars, so in Bitcoin. So be sure to check out what they're offering here. Also, if you decide to sign up for a loan and you are successful using the link that I provided down below, well, you'll be allowed or you'll be given an additional $50 worth of Bitcoin into your account. So do check that out. And with that, I'm going to dive into the news. So it looks like Bitcoin has been recovering a little bit from the lows in price the other day of the $7,400 to $7,500 range. However, there are a number of indicators showing that it's still a tad on the bearish side and we may be taking another drop in the near future. Now, what could that look like? I'm going to skip over a lot of this because I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the price today, but what could we be looking for as far as price point? Well, we may be revisiting 7K potentially, according to some of these indicators. At least that's where there's some major support, mostly because it's a psychological level. We may see some jumps back up to the 8K range in this recovery before that, but it's kind of anybody's guess. They say on a short-term period until we get over the 10-day moving average, which is around 83, so just shy of $8,400. Until we get above that level, we can't be sure that we're really in the clear for this pullback. So I guess we'll just have to take a look and watch over the coming days to see what happens. And with that, I'm going to dive into the next story that interested me today. This appears to be in response to Barry Silbert's digital currency group dropping their ad campaign called Drop Gold, where they created a video of everybody lugging around their bars of gold and saying that everybody needs to step into the 21st century and get themselves some digital gold, some Bitcoin. Well, this is, in my opinion, this is a pretty poor response. So this is an actual graphic dropped by Goldmoney CEO here, and it says Bitcoin has no weight. False. Bitcoin requires massive amounts of physical infrastructure in the natural world comprised of computational hardware, energy transformers, physical space, and human computer engineers. At least 1.69 kilograms for every Bitcoin unit. Bitcoin, far from being weightless or virtual, is actually physically heavier than gold. Which is just, I mean, you can look through the responses on Twitter and it was just, everybody's like, what are you saying? I mean, one of my favorite responses here, this is gold. It is. I responded myself. I said, I wish I could carry around my Bitcoin, but my pockets are way too full of internet. So, I mean, stupid ad for what I believe is an industry that is not going to have nearly as much of a foothold moving forward, especially with an up-and-coming younger generation that just sees Bitcoin as a fact of life as opposed to this departure from an old way of doing things. Younger people don't even know. They don't know the difference, and they won't know the difference moving forward, and they're much more likely, I think, to jump on the Bitcoin train than to actually hold gold. But we'll see. So this is a report from Bitcoinist, and it's talking about DApps, decentralized applications. Now, these things can be built on top of a lot of different blockchains, like Ethereum, like EOS, like Tron, like there's a whole bunch of different ones. But anyways, this report finds that most DApps are completely useless, and the users are mostly bots. So they said that DApps are essentially struggling to attract users. The bot activity is rampant, especially on EOS, and yeah, so there's a few things to touch on here. So one of them is only going back a few months. So on February 11th, 2019, 93% of Ethereum DApps did 0 transactions. So all of these DApps were built and largely abandoned. CryptoKitties was kind of an exception, but is pretty much fizzled out, even though it is one of the more active ones still out there. Now, this is interesting when it comes to the bot activity, particularly on EOS here. So they said, so they detect this AI bot. It can detect suspicious activity among blockchain dApps and monitor transactions. In what is the largest study of blockchain dApps and bot activity to date, the intelligence firm analyzed millions of transactions from the top 10 EOS gambling dApps. It essentially found out that 50% of unique accounts were bots, and that the bots actually accounted for 75% of all of the transactions happening. So they say, in other words, every day the equivalent of $6 million in transaction volume is driven by bots. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And they said that the good news for Ethereum is that its dApps aren't mentioned in the report, and that's good and bad news, because the bad news is they weren't studied by this firm, because EOS was the #1 dApp blockchain with 480 million in weekly transactional volume, again, which is mostly driven by bots. So yeah, not a great little story here for EOS or Ethereum, but let's move on. Bitpay, why are they still lying about Bitcoin transaction fees? So this is, again, a report that kind of came down to, somebody was on Reddit on, when was this? This was today, actually, on Reddit. Somebody dropped this screenshot from namecheap.com. So they're registering a domain name, and if you want to pay in Bitcoin, you're forwarded to this window where you can choose how you pay, and it gives you the option of Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. And here it says Bitcoin, and then it shows network cost $2.20, and then it has nothing for Bitcoin Cash. So essentially what they did is they saw this, and then they went to test something out. So the Reddit user, the $15 Namecheap payment incurred a $2.19 network fee, while as somebody from Bitcoinist went into the Bitpay app and wanted to top up $10, and it led to Bitpay charging them $2.20. So essentially the same fee for them to top up their account. So the fees amount to 14.6% and 22% of the total transaction amount, respectively, much more than the actual fee required to send transactions of that size. So what they're thinking here is that it could be that Bitpay is actually charging additional to kind of deceive Bitcoin users and kind of push more usage of Bitcoin Cash. At the very least, they're being negligent when it comes to actually having a responsible amount of fees there. Not only that, but they aren't running SegWit, so that only incurs more fees completely on their own fault. They could be fixing that. Yeah, so they've been shunning SegWit to not save their customers on fees. And all in all, it's just not a great look for Bitpay. I would recommend, if you're a merchant, checking out BTC Pay Server. You'll probably have a better experience with that. And I have this one other thing I wanted to touch on. Now, shout out to Russ, friend of mine here in Calgary, for pointing out this article to me. Very interesting, especially since I've been dabbling in Lightning as much as possible whenever I have free time. And this is about Lightning payments without using an invoice. So when you're using Lightning yourself and you're actually running a non-custodial wallet, well, the way that those work is if you're sending to somebody, they have to create an invoice for you requesting a specific amount, and you scan that and then you send the money. Or vice versa, if you want somebody to send you money, typically, unless you're using like a third-party service, you have to create an invoice yourself, and then the person can scan it and send you money. Well, Lightning payments can use something potentially called circular routing in order to achieve this without having to actually create an invoice. So the way that it would actually work is that you would create an invoice yourself and essentially pay it yourself, but you would route it in a funny way. And the way that it would work is it would go around in a circle and back to yourself, but on the way, as it jumped through the route, the nodes that it was reaching on the way back to yourself, it would stop and drop the amount that you want to pay an individual as a routing fee. So essentially, they would get the tip or whatever you wanted to leave them, and the rest of the funds would come back to you as kind of like change. And so this requires no upgrade for anybody running Lightning right now. It just needs to essentially be the protocol needs to be created and kind of implemented. But once live, it can be implemented in really anyone using Lightning. So yeah, there are a few downsides that have to be grappled with in something like this. So this means that the route is twice as long because it's circular, right? So instead of just going to the individual, it's actually doing a circle through the individual and back to you. So that could result in more fees. However, realistically, when you're sending a Lightning payment right now, it's typically 1 Satoshi to get it through. So 2 Satoshis, probably not a big deal. Now, the one thing here is that when the payee receives the money as a routing fee, it's hard to associate it with anything, as opposed to like you can't really distinguish it from usual fees, other than the fact that it would be larger than a typical fee that they would receive for routing. So that could also be seen as an anonymity feature. As I'm looking at that seems like an anonymity feature to me. Furthermore, this payment type requires sending and receiving parts both to be well connected so that you have proper liquidity. The other thing is there could be a potential for a man-in-the-middle attack here. And what that could mean is that, let's say you were sending and there was a route of 5 nodes. You are A, and then it goes through B, C, D, and then back to yourself, A. Well, if node number B and node D are both owned by the same person or the same entity, and they know kind of the route that it's taking, then they could potentially skip C and keep that payment themselves. Now, it would be very difficult to actually have this happen, in that you'd have to somehow insert yourself into that transaction knowingly, or just by chance be in that position. And the odds of that happening, in my opinion, seem kind of slim, but it is still something to consider. And as Bitcoin is you should always be thinking adversarially when you're thinking about these types of solutions. So yeah, really cool stuff. I'm interested to see how many things like this get tinkered with, and a lot of the issues put forward by detractors to the Lightning Network are being worked around with interesting ways of thinking like this. So really, really awesome to see. And so, guys, I'm going to start winding down here. Again, if you're in Calgary, if you're in the Calgary area and you know somebody that's brand new beginner to Bitcoin and they need some help getting themselves started and want to figure something out, and they really feel like they need some one-on-one sit-down time, I am hosting an event here on June 20th, Bitcoin basics for very, very beginners. Like, how do I set up a wallet? What's, how do I back things up? What are some do's and do nots? How do I not make a stupid mistake and send money to the wrong person? All of that kind of stuff, so that person will come out of it feeling confident that they know the basics and they're not going to screw up. So yeah, I will link to that down below. Feel free to share that around. And if you're new to the channel, of course, hit subscribe, hit like, hit that little bell notification icon, because every time I air this for the first time, I'm in the chat chatting everybody up. I do have a new Telegram channel I started not too long ago, so links for that down below. Feel free to join and shoot the shit. We're always just kind of talking in there about things that interest us. And of course, hit up my website, hit up ledn.io, had the link down below. And if you really like what you saw, feel free to drop me a Bitcoin tip via the Lightning Network and my tippin.me page. And with that, I am out. Thank you guys very much, and I will see you tomorrow for your daily session.